Hello and welcome to Iconoclasts. This has been in development for quite a while because it's actually been made predominantly by one dude, one guy, which always impresses me when you see those one-person development teams because it's generally been really impressive what they're actually able to accomplish, even if it takes them a little longer than your average team of like 200 people to actually make something, for fairly obvious reasons. And in this case, Mr. Sandberg has created something that I think is actually worth quite a look because it's part of the kind of recent indie revival of Metroidvania games that we've been experiencing on PC. And I'm a big fan of Metroidvanias. I think they're really fun. And they kind of harken back to really just me like chilling in my bedroom when I was younger playing Symphony of the Night way too much. And those are memories that I would like to re-experience. So, when, it kind of came about that we weren't getting very many AAA games in that genre anymore, or really any, it was sort of interesting to see that for the last few years we've been actually getting a fair number of indie-developed games in that space, and most of them have been on PC, strangely enough, which is not where they were sort of born. But here we are with a pretty interesting one. So Iconoclasts is more or less a Metroidvania following following the kind of classic puzzle platformer route with some interesting little subversions here and there and a different focus. The focus more on story and characters. Electrical gear might travel a thornfield safely. Large coils near the path should you're distant. Great. And as you can see here, there are lots of environmental puzzles just for traveling around the world. Oh, and that goes right back too. Oh, I see what I gotta do. This could be tricky. Okay. And in this case, some of the puzzles simply involve just the action of traversal itself. The idea of going back and forth between various areas of the world. Oh. Well, okay. This is bad. Can often take the form of solving various sorts of puzzles, which I always found kind of interesting. I mean, some of the more recent Metroidvania games have been doing this sort of thing. Games like Hollow Knight, for instance, which is actually one of my favorite games of last year, decided to do this with its skills, because one of the kind of prime elements of a Metroidvania is how you are expected to traverse. I'm failing this miserably. Traverse the how you're expected to go back to previous areas with things that you've found and unlock new areas. I don't quite understand all of this yet. And if some of that traversal is actually based on abilities and combat skills and things like that, it actually gets a bit different. Well, I don't quite know what I'm supposed to be doing here, to be totally honest with you. I don't fully understand what I'm meant to do. I see that I'm supposed to use this, which is a rolling bomb, that can explode and force that platform over here, and I'm likely supposed to ride it back over there, but I don't understand the point at which I can actually get it over there. And this is the kind of thing that I like. If you don't like puzzles, then this game is... What is that? This game is probably not going to be for you, because it does involve a lot of them. And that actually leads me on to another one. I'm gonna die here. Another one of the prime points of the game, it's boss fights. The boss fights in this game are actually kind of phenomenal. There are somewhere around the 20-ish mark, and they tend to be very puzzle-oriented, and honestly, a lot of the gameplay in general, if I was to just pick a singular game that this reminds me of the most, it's actually Mega Man X, because a lot of the combat, the boss fights, and the exploration and things in general reminds me of Mega Man X. Not to an extent that it's exactly like it, but to the level that there's a lot of secrets around the place that involve hidden walls, and jumping around in kind of odd, why did I do that? In odd areas that you may not have expected, things like that. Although you don't have the wall jump and the dash in the same way that Mega Man X had, it's still, its movement system is still, you know, similar-ish. I'm supposed to be getting up there, clearly. Yeah, those don't do anything for me from here. I'm genuinely confused as to how I get that there. Let me just take a good look at this. It goes very fast. I've got an idea. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm dumb. I forgot you can shoot this straight up through those. Like that. Yeah. Not a problem. That took way too long for me to figure out. Okay. And the boss fights, again, kind of, unlike something like, say, Hollow Knight, which uses... I know the comparison's a bit tired at this point, but a lot of people would say it uses somewhat almost Dark Souls-esque boss fights, with its, a lot of very heavy phase-based boss fights, a lot of figuring out patterns and things of that nature. This is actually more like the Mega Man X kind of method. So you've got things in the nature of... Oh, I see why I needed to do that. Things in the nature of very few moments of vulnerability in the bosses, with a need to actually figure out when they're vulnerable and when you can actually attack them. So why did I do all of that exactly? And figure out the puzzles for when you're supposed to actually be doing that in between all of their various attacks. Oh, I did that for the key. Right. I already forgot. And I actually kind of find that interesting, but unlike Mega Man X and more like something like Hollow Knight, the bosses also have a significant number of phases. Which means they actually get pretty complicated, and I think that's, personally at least, one of the best parts. I'm going to save all that because that was a bit more complicated than I thought it would be. One of the best parts of the bosses is how complex they can actually become quite quickly. So this place is actually significantly more puzzle-based in terms of its just getting around it than... Oh no, that was just for a chest, I remember. But if I was to say go up here, it should be this, which leads me over here, and I can use this key. There is combat, and there are several weapons, and, again, sort of like Mega Man X, one of the comparisons, the combat often involves avoidance of specific telegraphed and projectile-based enemy attacks and using charge shots and things like that, and sometimes jump attacks, in order to actually get the enemy's vulnerabilities straight. But, unlike in something like that, the charge shot actually puts you on a fairly hefty cooldown. If I just did this, you see it doesn't do anything. You do have the wrench, though, which can be used for damage. And to... I was wondering if the electricity did anything. And to parry enemy attacks. As well as to deflect certain attacks back at them in a pretty interesting fashion. Now, I actually got this guy down once before I had the key, without any trouble whatsoever, but I don't know how I did it. So I don't know when he's vulnerable. Let's open this door. Try and get behind him, probably. Although I don't know how to do that. I don't have a dash or a dodge. Unfortunately, you don't start with one. There we go. This area and its challenges I'm actually very bad at dealing with. Oh! Nope. You just scoot right past him. I was hoping I could wait for him to pound down and then hop behind him, but it seems that he actually slips by very quickly. Well, I hit him right then, but I don't know what part of his animation he was vulnerable. Not that part. Well, there was obviously a part where I could hurt him, but I can't figure out when it was. So I'm just going to pass him by. Damn it, there's another one. You'll also see that there are multiple ways you can actually sort of get hurt. You've got the obvious health gauge, lol, and the, you know, that was actually, oh, because you can't grab that. There's the health gauge and the less obvious tweaks down at the bottom. Those, how are you supposed to, you cannot duck during that animation. Interesting to know. These are all things I've never tried before, which is why I'm failing so miserably, because I've never actually had to do any of these things. This place is quite the spike in trying things that you've never had to try before. Those 3 symbols below the health gauge are tweaks, which are interesting passive upgrades that involve the... I think you're really just supposed to deflect these guys into spikes. That's the best way to get rid of them. You can obviously find a way to hurt them, but it seems much more efficient just to spike them. Let's do that from now on. And yeah, those tweaks are passive upgrades that you craft at various benches. And the interesting thing about that is it's almost like a second health gauge, in that your actual red health gauge has its obvious consequence of it depletes and you die. But that first one, the tweaks below, if you take a hit, whew, very small time frame to duck there, the first slot deactivates, and whatever tweak was placed there is no longer affecting you until you collect a bunch of those white spark things that enemies in some containers drop, and that gauge you can see fills back up, and then it reactivates that slot. And the first slot I have, you may notice, actually negates a single hit, basically makes you invulnerable for a single hit. Very useful in bosses that have really huge hits, or if you suck really bad like me and are trying to figure out really inefficient ways to kill enemies. And the tweak slots go on like that. If the first one is depleted and you get hit another time, then the second one depletes, and so on and so forth until... Oh, it still hurt me. Until you run out. Hi. Go into the pit. Into, oh, jeez, into the pit. This place is kind of insidious, actually. Oh man. So, if you're actually good at the game, which I used to be doing a little bit better in the less complicated areas, then you can actually get through them in a very satisfying way, because the movement system feels quite satisfying. And the combat, although very simple, like a lot of Metroidvanias, does its job effectively. Now I need to get under there. But really, I think the focus of the game, as I said earlier, is definitely its story. And its characters. The characters that you can see up there in the top right actually have a party, because you can find other characters that are important to the story and actually take them with you. Not only that, but I was actually genuinely surprised at some points. You can actually slide down those slopes. That might be interesting to know for like a boss fight later on. I'm going to keep that in mind. You never know with this game. And, yeah, but something I definitely didn't expect is that during a boss fight, yeah, you actually have to switch between the characters. And it's not just like a button that makes you switch between the character where you currently are standing as if they all take up the same space. You actually get separated in the giant, like, one-screen boss battle. It takes up the whole place. And, oh, I know where that is, I bet. You actually have to switch, like tag team, give each other a high five and switch between the areas. Holy crap. Is that the boss? Oh god. I wouldn't put it past this game at all, because they've all been pretty impressively sized. You know what, I'm not going to make this run out faster, I'm not going to press my luck, I'm just going to be patient. If you're as bad as I am, patience is kind of necessary. Nope! And yeah, so you had to tag team in your friend and switch between the two sides of the full screen sized boss arena and actually switch characters and movesets and things to fight the boss. Which was really interesting. That was a very neat mechanic. It hasn't been used again since, which is, you know, kind of a good idea. You don't want to do that every single time, or it would be expected by that point, because it was a, it was a novel thing at the time. But if they did eventually do it again, I wouldn't be upset, because that was really fun. You had completely different weapons and abilities as each character, and a shared health gauge. It was very interesting to actually do that. And the bosses, like I said, so far have all been really, really cool. Some of them have been very combat oriented, as in just do damage to them. Some of them have been very puzzle oriented, as in there were very specific times you could do damage to them, otherwise they didn't take any hits at all, and a very specific point they would take damage. Only hit them at that specific time, in that specific area, with a very specific thing. And the bosses have ranged, you know, from one side of the spectrum to the other. And it's been pretty interesting so far. This is the tweak system. You can craft them at various crafting benches that you can find throughout the world with these resources that you find in chests. Some of the chests are very hard to get to. Some of them you need, again, very Metroidvania-esque, you need specific abilities or weapons or items to actually come back and get, so not every chest you see at first you can actually obtain when you see it. And these tweaks, once you actually craft them, you can go to a save point and equip them, and you can equip them to any slot. And like I mentioned earlier, the slot order does matter because the rightmost slot is the first one to break when you get hit. And they go from right to left. So the tweak you want to be equipped with the longest is the one that you are actually going to want to like have on the far left. But considering the Iron Heart here says protects you against damage once, I figured I'd actually want that on the right, because it seems like since it only protects you from one hit, it's going to deactivate when you get hit once anyway, even if it doesn't break, which means you want to refill it as quickly as possible so it can be active again. At least that's my interpretation of how this tweak works. The tweak system is actually really interesting. It adds a bit of like a light RPG element to the game, and it's kind of like Hollow Knight's those passive charms. Not quite as many, of course, but it's very much a similar style of idea. And you can even have multiple of the same tweak, so you can have like 3 Iron Hearts if you want. And there are several different ones. There's one I'm trying to get a hold of right now that gives you a dodge roll, because that sounds extremely useful. But I don't currently have the necessary resources to actually get a hold of it. But I'm working on it. I am almost there. I just need 2 more things. And you can find schematics that allow you to craft more and more. There's some of those blue things. Blue things? White things. I was looking at the flower. And yeah, so you can find schematics that allow you to actually craft more of those various tweaks around the place. Sometimes in chests or sometimes just like chilling on the floor. I don't know who I am. Okay. Oh boy. This whole place has been very puzzle oriented. The previous like 2 areas were kind of even on the like combat to getting around puzzle ratio, whereas the Farrier Shockwoods here have been extremely like puzzle oriented. The last one, well the last 2 really, were more like about half the rooms were pretty combat heavy and about half the rooms were sort of puzzle oriented, whereas this one is just like everything is a puzzle. Spikes everywhere, dudes everywhere. Get through it. Alright, so what happens if I... Oh boy. Oh dear. That looks kind of rough. Oh, they move at different speeds. Ah. That's annoying. Okay, I think I kind of understand. If I stand up on here, does it only move? Yeah, it only moves those 2. If I then... No, they move way too quick. Okay. So I'm gonna get over here. Ah, God! That didn't quite work like I thought it would. Okay. And... No, I actually can't get up through that way. Well, that's unfortunate. I can then only move that. What happens if I let that go? I'm guessing my main goal is to get that spike to move over and kill that dude so I can pass through. There's that. How do I move the spike? It's the bottom one, yeah? Gotcha. Okay. One concern, members. Remember, do not execute any order if it involves researching non-vacated areas. Oh yeah, I should also mention the story in this game, without spoiling anything, is very interesting. It involves a sort of religious bent of this particular world you're in being the sort of almost Shinra-esque religious cult with the power and technology of the world, having a religion built around it, a very zealous religion that does not like anyone else controlling it, because, I mean, that's usually how it works. If the power is... Oh, that's what that was. If the power is controlled by one organization, then they can basically control the world, and this particular type of power, called Ivory, has some very supernatural elements to it. It involves basically giving people some superpowers and some other stuff. And there's some other mysterious stuff going on that I'm not really going to mention, but it gets pretty crazy and very interesting with some specific characters. And there are some sort of like spec ops almost style enforcers within the religion that go around and try to make sure people aren't abusing this power without the permission of the organization that controls it. And you, this character, Robin, she is actually a mechanic, but she's not a licensed mechanic. So she has a wrench and she can work on stuff and do mechanic-y things, but she's not under license from this organization, which means basically she's a heretic and is not good in their eyes and is being hunted down. And there's actually a system called penance in place that will punish anyone that is what she is, more or less. And that's actually one of them right there, but in this place they don't really recognize me. Oh, that guy does! Yow! Rude! Oh, I thought that would finish him off. There we go. Okay. And it all involves a really interesting kind of web of intrigue and mystery with the different races and factions of the world having their own interpretations of what's going on and their own kind of places to live and kind of different religious bends on, oh my god, what's actually going on, which may or may not involve some things you could interpret as just like kind of advanced versions of technology we already possess, but people giving it more value, more like supernatural value than it deserves and things like that. It's really interesting. This is almost like, whoops. It almost feels like a prequel to Warhammer 40,000 tech priests and stuff like that is what's going on. It's pretty cool. Okay. And like I said, the characters themselves are genuinely kind of fascinating on their own. Oh. I think that's one of those schematics I was talking about. If I just put this here. It's not quite where I wanted that. Come on. Right there. I just want to throw it off and lose it. There we go. Gimme. Yep, more tweaks. Sweet. And the various characters you meet along the way are genuinely as interesting as well. And as you save them and help them save you, because I also like that you as Robin aren't always the hero. And like I mentioned in that other boss fight, the other character that you're fighting the boss with is basically the hero of that fight. And even though you're the main character, you're really one main character. You don't have to do everything all the time. And I think that's always interesting when you aren't always necessarily like the hero of the land and have to do everything and everyone else around you is helpless to your will. There are plenty of other characters that are at least as effective as you at doing things, and they travel along with you and you're a team together, and that means sharing the responsibility for what you're doing. And I always find stories written that way more interesting. There we go. Here's a bench, a crafting bench, so I can make all sorts of things. Let's see. Shock value is pretty good. Stay electrified for longer. Dodger is the one that I want. Nothing to do with a specific YouTuber, by the way. And would be really, really useful. But I need 2 more of those ivory oils, of which I have 0. So I can't quite do that, but I'm going to save up for that for now. And these very proud Contras here. Uh-huh. Yes, indeed. It likes green. I do. Maybe later. Where is it? Oh, it's up there. Oh, but it's tiny. How do I get up there? I bet I need that box. How do I get that box over here? Well, anyway, this, I think, has been a fair look at the ideas involved in Iconoclasts. Got it. The really quite impressive production of one man from Sweden. Oh god. And a crap. A very much worth your while. No, get away! Very much worth your while Metroidvania. That is another one to add to the collection of kind of indie revival Metroidvanias that we've been experiencing as of late. Oh. Yeah. Improvium. I bet that improves things. Alright. The levels themselves are quite expansive. The characters are fun to learn about and have quite a lot to say. And the art style is really good as well. There's actually a lot of personality in the various little animations and stuff that the characters do. So that means if you leave it resets. So you can probably screw this one up. Gotcha. Good to know. Who are you? And the story itself is actually very fun to discover more about and go along with, and you know, keep discovering more about, because it does actually have some mystery to it and some intrigue that I want to keep actually discovering. And I can switch these two. Oh, watch this. It's got here. Whee! Oh, there's thorns. Don't jump into the thorns again. That's dumb. Okay. This looks very complex. Okay then. I guess you should probably leave me to figure this out on my own. Thank you very much for watching. Iconoclasts, available now, for the price of $20, which isn't too bad. I think there's enough gameplay here to justify that price. And also I should probably mention that the soundtrack is pretty great as well. Come on. You can do it. You can do it! I can't. I can't do it. That's unfortunate. Pick it up now on Steam. I'll put the link in the description below this video for you to check out. And, yeah. If you liked the video, please do leave a like. If you thought I was absolutely horrible at this game, because I actually am, then leave a factually correct comment below if you want to do that. And, yeah. I'll see you guys next time.